What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Smart Money Bootcamp. In today's lesson, we are going to start talking about supply and demand. Keep in mind that this video is going to be more of a conceptual video to build off of later on. So, what is supply and demand? Supply is any area where aggressive sellers may show up. Demand is any area where aggressive buyers may show up. That is like the technical definition for it, if you want to put it that way. From an economical standpoint, you can say that supply and demand is what moves the market you are describing. Many teachers or supply and demand traders will tell you that the market moves solely based on supply and demand. In my opinion, and the way I want you to look at it from OZFX standpoint, I believe that supply and demand is a major factor, but not the only factor. We will talk about the other factors in later videos, but for now, just understand conceptually that supply and demand is one of the major forces that moves the market. But what is supply and demand in trading? And why am I talking about it? Supply and demand zones are left behind after aggressive selling or buying. If we see an aggressive move, like the one that I've drawn right here, we should understand that in most cases, smart money is behind the move. Why is that? Retail traders do not by themselves have enough money to move the market. The funds are just too small. Retail traders are not sponsoring moves like this right here. Just remember that supply is an area where previous selling has taken place, and you could see continued selling once returned to that level. Demand, like the one that I have, the demand zone that I have drawn right here, is just the opposite. It's an area where previous buying has taken place and can continue once returned to that level. Now, we haven't covered order blocks and institutional candles yet, but write this down. Understand the fact that supply and demand zones will often line up with order blocks and institutional candles. Supply and demand zones are typically a lot bigger. They can be the entire consolidation. So, for example's sake, and this one right here, this last down move before the up move could be the actual order block, but the actual demand zone is inside of the entire structure here, meaning that any return to this level before the breakout, you could see some buying come back. So if order blocks and supply and demand zones line up, why am I even talking to this, and what does it even mean for you? When we begin to analyze a chart, we can start with, where are the supply and demand zones? Are we inside of a supply zone or a demand zone where price has moved away from very quickly? After we identify these zones, we can begin to refine them, which you will learn how to do in the next upcoming videos. To be 100% real with you, a lot of people confuse supply and demand and order blocks as the exact same thing. I hear a lot of people, and they're not even technically wrong, because an order block is an area of demand or supply. So sometimes if you're watching a YouTuber or you're watching any kind of trader and they're drawing lines on order blocks or boxes on order blocks to mark the order block and they're calling it an area of demand, they're not wrong. That is correct. But an actual supply or demand zone can be a lot bigger, especially when you bring time frames into the picture. But now we're going to go over to TradingView and actually look for some supply and demand. Alright, so I have Euro USD pulled up, and we're just going to look for some areas of supply and demand. And this is hindsight, past tense, but it's all for example's sake and just to show you what I'm talking about here. So first one that I see, overall area of supply, would be this entire box right here. And as you can see, price returned to it, selling came afterwards. And remember when I said supply and demand zones are where you could start and later refine them to the order blocks. Now, once again, we have not gone through order blocks, but if you wanted to refine this all the way up to the last order block, it would be here and you would have missed it. So that's why I say supply and demand zones and order blocks can vary and line up at the same time. Alright, now if we zoom in here, I see an area of demand, and it can be this overall area here. See, this can be an overall area of demand, or you could have refined it to the order block and that worked as well. Or you can move this one up here, because this right here is also an area of demand. And why is that? Because there was rapid buying pressure that took out some structure beforehand. Where is the actual order block in here? If you don't know, you don't know yet. Okay, the actual order block does get hit, and this is where refinement can come into play. If you train your eyes how to spot supply and demand, you will oftentimes, or almost always, not always, but almost always be able to find an order block inside of it. Order blocks are not the only thing that we are going to trade off of in Smart Money, and the very next lesson is going to be on order blocks, so any questions that you have about order blocks are going to be answered in the next video. But let's keep on looking. we move this over here, I can see one, and I'm not sure how this is going to work out. Let's say this, another area of demand, gets hit, more buying happens. Why is this an area of demand? Rapid move to the upside, returns back, more move to the upside. Looking at another area of demand here, you could use this entire area before the breakout happens, right? Because there's no real order block inside of here, but this does sponsor a lot of buying right here. It takes out all this structure in here. Institutional buying, hence that smart money is behind these moves. A return into this demand zone over here, and it moves back up again. Now, does it ultimately fall off? Yes, but if you know how to manage a trade, then you could have gotten this with a win. Multiple entries inside of this. I am on a 4-hour chart right now. There is a lot more that you can do on the 1 hour. And another thing is, remember, this video is meant to be conceptual. I want you to understand what supply and demand is. Supply is where selling comes in. Demand is where buying comes in. This one is a bit extreme, but here's an example of supply. Hits right into the supply zone, rejects. I see another supply zone right here. Hits it, rejects. So if you are a brand new trader and this is your first exposure to supply and demand, because I feel like generally most traders already know what supply and demand is and probably don't even need to watch this video, but if you are a beginner and this is your first exposure to supply and demand, I want to challenge you to go back into your charts and look for areas of supply and demand. Aggressive buying and aggressive selling, extend them out in time, see what happens when they get hit. Alright guys, I'm out. I'll catch you in the next video.